is now official. Endeavor announcing WWE and UFC will combine to form a $21 billion global live sports and entertainment company.
Endeavor confirming this deal to merge UFC with WWE, forming a $21 billion global live sports and entertainment giant.
In 2023, the world's leading mixed martial arts promotion, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and the world's premier professional wrestling company, the World Wrestling Entertainment, merged into one massive combat conglomerate under the TKO Group Holdings banner, a subsidiary of the UFC's parent company, Endeavor Entertainment. The merger was full of HBO-level twists and turns. Vince McMahon, head of the WWE, returning from a board-driven exile after several allegations of sexual misconduct and misappropriation of funds. The reshaping of the WWE board of directors, including McMahon family exits, in a world where the WWE didn't have a McMahon on top. Along with the drama that seemed like it had been lifted from the unaired seasons of Succession, there was a much more innocent, but in many deep corners, a much more important and frustrating dilemma afoot. For fans of both the UFC and the WWE, the question was, can a work and a legitimate sport coexist under the same roof? Could they share representation? Could they share competitors? Would they bleed into each other? How much trust can be put in a bout held on the Octagon on Saturday when we know that the same parent company is working the matches in Sunday's squared circle? A fix in boxing isn't unheard of, but it's believed to be a thing of the past. And as far as the UFC is concerned, there's been next to no suspicion about the legitimacy of their competitions, even if their business model has at times aped that of the WWE. Was there cause for concern? Would we be able to see through it if there was? These questions are fair, and the concerns have precedent. Precedent that reaches back over a century to the foundations of modern professional wrestling. The carnival and the carnies who manipulated it, in the realm of legitimate world champions, and the promoters who saw their collective futures in a fix. This is because the melding of the legitimate fighter and the flamboyant showman is old hat. And like most of history, the situation is cyclical. This is the story of the men who solidified the National Wrestling Circuit and melded the Carnival Con and the Arena Showdown into what would one day become a billion-dollar industry. This is the story of the Gold Dust Trio. Okay, welcome to Catch 22, a podcast about where wrestling and MMA intersect, how one became the other and the other became one again. I'm here with the proprietor of Grit and Growth MMA, my good friend Javier. He hates the way I say that.
You're Canadian, it's not your fault, man.
Yeah, I know.
It's just very white.
Silly Canucks, us provincials. And I'm Blake Ferris. I'm, I guess you could say, an amateur pro wrestling historian, because that's a made-up term. You can't get a degree in that, so sure. And we're going to talk today about one of the most important, I guess, groups of people in the history of professional wrestling, and in how professional wrestling became professional wrestling, and how it separated really pretty defiantly, pretty definitely from traditional, legitimate catch-as-catch-can. And that would be the Gold Dust Trio. That is a term, of course, given to them after they were disbanded. It wasn't something they put on themselves.
Gold Dust Trio?
The Gold Dust Trio, because they had a license to print money. And the Gold Dust Trio was formed by Billy Sandow, who was an ex-wrestler and a promoter and manager, and a fellow named Ed Strangler Lewis, who in the early part of the 20th century spent about 10 years at the top of the wrestling game. And then the third guy is a fellow named Toots Mondt. And Toots Mondt is actually extremely interesting, kind of the creative mind behind what would become professional wrestling. Also, a serious badass wrestler, a spooky looking man. You look at him, you don't want to talk to him.
Question, sorry. So you're saying if we're talking about this is where pro wrestling came from, so when you say wrestler, what do you mean by wrestler?
He was a catch-as-catch-can wrestler.
Okay.
So all three of these men were very capable catch wrestlers. Dangerous men in their own respects. But they were, like almost everyone involved in almost everything, they were really interested in making money.
Of course.
And they were very good at it. And this is kind of the story of how they came together to create modern wrestling. And then we're going to end it with how real wrestling ruined them. So we're going to start with Billy Sandow. So Sandow is actually from a family of wrestlers. His brothers were all wrestlers. They all became promoters. They, of course, they were bombing.
And so we're talking, what years are we talking about?
We're talking about the turn of the 20th century. So Billy Sandow, I think, probably won his last championship just before the First World War.
Oh, shit.
And then he went on, he kind of worked with the military training, the American military training, soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. But there's not a lot of money in that, and the war ends.
Right.
So the war ends, his role in the war ends, and he discovers Ed the Strangler Lewis. Ed Lewis took his name from Evan Lewis, who was an earlier wrestling champion, American wrestling champion. Evan Lewis was 30 years before that, the top wrestler in America.
Okay.
World champion. Billy Sandow took his name from Eugene Sandow, who was a carnival strongman. So, everything's kind of harkening back.
Because people aren't wrestling in a school or anything at this point, right?
Like people are wrestling just in fields.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there's gyms. There's wrestling gyms everywhere.
Right.
But a lot of wrestling, and we'll get into this in other episodes, comes mostly from military. Like a lot of military influence.
Oh, shit. I didn't know that.
For two reasons. First of all, like during the American Civil War, catch wrestling catches on, no pun intended, and becomes very big with the soldiers.
Okay.
Because they got a lot of time.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah,
there's
yeah.
not a lot to do. So you just get out there and grapple. And that's where the whole, and there's all the stories. George Washington was a wrestler. We all know Abraham Lincoln was a wrestler. And all this stuff. So that's where it really becomes big in America. And the other thing is that, like, soldiers, when they're traveling, they get to go and pick up styles, which is why, like, Lancashire, which we'll get into another day, but Lancashire catch wrestling is the best catch wrestling. It's the American catch wrestling. It's everything. But it's because these dudes were on a huge port. So, boys would come in, get picked up, they go on the boats, they end up in India, they're learning Pelwani, they're learning Gusti, they're learning, then they go to Iran and they learn whatever the guys in Iran are doing. So that's how kind of wrestling evolves. And these guys are no different, except for they're completely landlocked. These are dudes that exist in the Nebraska, Iowa kind of situation, which is historically where the best American wrestlers come from to this day.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Even a guy like Gable Stevenson.
Matt Hughes.
Dan Gable, Brock Lesnar, Minnesota boy.
Oh, really? Oh,
of course. Yeah, I mean, now he lives in Saskatchewan or some shit.
Does he really?
Yeah. As far away from humans as he can be.
Wow. Can't blame him on that.
No, I understand completely, Brocky. So yeah, he meets this teenage Ed Lewis, who's changed his name to Ed Lewis. The story goes so that his parents wouldn't know he was wrestling.
Because there was some prestige to wrestling, but there's also, I guess, some like danger and stuff to read. It's dangerous, yeah.
And especially work. This isn't worked wrestling. We're talking about shoot wrestling, real wrestling. And he's a teenage kid, and he's wiping the floor with a lot of cats. You know what I mean? But there's still, you get hurt. And these are, sometimes you bite, you headbutt, you scratch, you poke eyes, you do what you got to do, you break thumbs. And these guys are legitimate wrestlers, but wrestling always has been fake, to an extent. Okay. In the same way that everything else, I can't believe I said fake, worked.
Yeah, what's the term?
Wrestling has been worked. I don't like choreographed.
Okay. Scripted, maybe?
Scripted is, the finish is scripted. We can say the finish is scripted.
Okay.
Because there's money in it. And there's gambling in it. And where there's gambling, there's gangsters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And gangsters want to know the score. And these promoters are gangsters.
Right.
Even the ones that aren't gangsters. Gangsters. You know what I mean? Like, they're getting paid. They're ruthless. There's codes.
And you're talking pre-NFL, pre-NBA, like
Boxing and wrestling are the biggest sports in North America.
yeah.
Of course, football already has its hold in Europe and much of the world. Baseball is on the rise. Baseball is very big. Baseball's getting rigged. The 1919 World Series.
Oh, is that
Or was it 18? 1918, 1919 World Series. Rigged by Arnold Rothstein. Everybody finds out. There's a huge trial. Everybody knows that things can be rigged. Everybody knows. We just watched that Paul kid.
Yeah.
We know things can be rigged.
And boxing is kind of famous for that too.
If boxing, horse racing. Horse racing.
Horse racing's rigged?
Horse racing is a good jockey is the jockey who loses. That's like a classic Hemingway line. It's like, he's the greatest jockey. I've never seen a jockey lose like that. He's the greatest jockey I've ever seen. So that's kind of the way everybody knows if you can gamble on it, there's a potential for work. But a worked match between guys leading up into this, leading into the 20s, which has been happening for 100 years. Not super common, because it's still very pride-focused.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Also, not that interesting. They haven't found a way to rig it and make it that exciting. They've just found a way to rig it and make it look real.
Oh, okay. So it still looks the same. It's the same kind of finishes, but
like,
they're just predicting.
You're kind of beating the shit out of each other.
Right.
But you know that, like, I'm going to go down on the fourth or whatever.
Right, okay.
Kind of like boxing would be, right?
Sure.
What these guys do is they realize that there's so much money to be made in return matches. So,
like a rematch?
Like a rematch. And these guys worked carnivals. They worked carnivals. They learned how to work marks already, just working carnivals. Because you go to the carnival, you challenge people. But you have a plant. So, the plant in the audience can go either way. Maybe he comes up here and just loses real quick to kind of scare off. Maybe you see like someone who looks like he wants to wrestle, and you think this guy might take me, right? You think maybe this guy's got some juice, some big farm boy. You don't want to play around, so you beat the hell out of this plant. Hopefully that stirs. Or maybe this plant comes in and has a real good run, and someone who couldn't beat you thinks they can now. And then all right, come on in, get your money. Oh,
that was close.
Maybe
you almost got
3.
me. Yeah.
And then tomorrow you got to come back and take 3 more because you got the whole crowd right. Maybe you got the whole town. Now you're really making money.
Because, I mean, these carnivals would stay for what? Somewhere between a couple days and a week usually per town?
Tops a week. Right?
Tops a week. But they're not staying for
2 or 3 days.
Right.
4 days.
Right.
And you can fleece a lot of suckers.
Sure.
In that amount of time if you know, like, a good toe hold.
Sure.
You know, like, you can really take someone down. So these guys have all these kind of little tricks. But they know that, like, the money's in having the world championship, the money's in return, and the money's in doing business. So they start to figure out how to work and how to promote. They get the world title, maybe genuinely, probably not, from a guy named Joe Stecker. Joe Stecker's a bad man, but he's a businessman too. His brother is kind of like the other Billy Sando, Tony Stecker. These are Chicago boys, okay?
Okay.
But they're going around the world. They're wrestling this and that, mostly America. But, you know, they take their trips. They do their tours. And
because is this popular in Japan at this point? Even
this has not touched Japan.
Okay.
There are some Japanese, like, judokas that are kind of coming over and participating in this in America. But they're not bringing it to Japan.
Back this way. Okay.
No. So... Where was I?
Sorry. Chicago boys.
Right. So they get the world championship, and they're working with Toots. And Toots Mondt was introduced to them by a man named Farmer Burns, who we'll get into, who's a
legend. Very
important part of catch wrestling history in America, and a real character and a worker himself. Like, definitely a man who knew how to work. But so they realize, okay, the money's in the return match. The money is in having a serious threat. And the money's in getting the crowd invested. So they start turning Ed Lewis into kind of the first wrestling heel.
And heel being again the bad guy, right?
He's kind of the first wrestling he's barely making it through. He's pulling out all the stops. He's doing underhanded tricks,
throwing the elbow a little
throwing
bit,
elbows, headbutting, gouging. You know, he every night he goes in and wrestles the guy and barely survives, but continues to be it's the Ric Flair playbook for any modern wrestling fans.
Okay,
You do an hour, and until 59 minutes, you're pretty sure that your hometown boy is going to win.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But this is, of course, the age of shooters. Everyone in this business could potentially win a wrestling match on any given day.
Right. So you're saying like they're all very physically capable. They have the skills.
Very capable. Which means you have to have trusted men. So you can't be going town to town taking the hometown babyface. They've got a touring troupe. They've got guys like Tiger Man John Pesek, who could pound for pound be the baddest wrestler that ever lived. Like he was a policeman.
Oh.
So if someone got some bright ideas about, and I'm not talking an actual policeman, I mean like he policed wrestling.
Oh, I see. Like an enforcer in hockey or something. Okay.
So if you had some challenger that, you know, could be a threat to Ed Lewis, okay, well if you beat John Pesek,
he's the gatekeeper.
You can come fight Ed Lewis. And Pesek would just get disqualified, but hurt you so bad you didn't want to do it again. You know what I mean? Like he was a bad man.
Okay.
And guys like Stanislavs and Vladik Sabisco and guys like Tutsman who would travel with the troupe, they'd be perennial challengers, and ultimately they would go down, right?
And I guess because, you know, there's these towns are generally talking to each other, you can probably move town to town and kind of put on a similar show.
There's no internet.
Right? So,
TV's regional, newspapers are regional. This would be a big thing in wrestling until the early 90s.
Wow.
Really, of like, me and you and I are great wrestlers together. We have great matches together. We have good chemistry. All right, well, we're going to do 9 months in Portland, and then we're going to do 2 years in Houston, and we're going to go to Memphis, and then we're going to go to Atlanta, and we're going to do the exact same thing everywhere we go. Or
something similar, maybe.
I'm a bad guy in Atlanta, and I'm a good guy in LA.
Oh, cool. Okay. Just play it up a little bit.
Nobody knows that I'm, like, kicking babies in Atlanta.
Saving them.
Like, nobody knows these things. Because how would they? Maybe, like one kid, like, has an aunt in LA, and he has to go... he sees you on TV, and he's like, oh, my God. Okay. These people love him. They don't know who he really is.
If only they knew.
So that's the way wrestling operated. It was just like, yeah, we're going town to town. We're pulling the same stunts. We're doing, you know, the carnival thing, and we're doing somewhat still boring matches, which starts to kind of hurt the gate after a while. When you're seeing the same champion defend against the same contenders, and sometimes, especially in legitimate matches, I mean, a legitimate match. What's the Olympic record? It was like 11 hours and 58 minutes or something.
Oh.
And then they put an hour time limit on wrestling matches in the Olympics. Because can you imagine?
11
hours. And then, especially with the Olympics, like, you still got to do all the other matches.
Right. Everyone's waiting around.
You know what I mean? So, like, wrestling. Oh, we went to the Garden and saw a 3.5 hour hug fest.
Because as someone who loves wrestling, I've been doing wrestling for a while. It's pretty boring to watch.
It's pretty boring to watch a catch match.
Yeah, really it's very technical. Unless you know even if you know what's going on, it can be a little dull.
A lot of riding, a lot of grinding.
Yeah,
not exciting.
Yeah.
So they bring in Tutsman. Tutsman's a younger cat. He was in vaudeville when he was a child. He's a stocky, short, ugly man, but he's a creative genius. And along with Sandow and Lewis, they kind of invent something they call the slam bang Western style of pro wrestling, which is super interesting because it is, in its own way, an early form of MMA. Because what they've done...
Sort of slam bang Western style.
Slam bang Western style wrestling.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it's just excitement. And how they do it is they take basically all the styles and they make them all legal.
Okay. So you can start punching now all of a sudden. And
yeah, punching, no, but but it basically, before this, you had your styles, right? So you had collar and elbow, Irish collar and elbow.
Sure.
You had Cornish wrestling, which is like jacket wrestling, kind of like
almost like a gi,
like a gi kind of, yeah. Greco-Roman, which is actually Norwegian. Like a lot of people don't understand this. It's like Greco-Roman is Scandinavian style wrestling, but they named it that for the Olympics because it made it sound more traditional. So that like it's all like upper body.
Yeah, that's what Randy Couture's specialty. Yeah,
very difficult, very hard.
Yeah.
Hitting stuff. That is not like Pancrace's Greco-Roman wrestling, but Greco-Roman wrestling in the Olympics is actually Scandinavian wrestling, upper body based wrestling.
Yeah.
Catch can from Lancashire.
Yeah.
So they kind of.
You have some of those judo influences coming in.
Lots of judo influences. And they all...
Some of the Russian influences, like the sambo. Okay, yeah.
Savat.
Yeah.
Like, all these things are in there because the great thing about Catch kind of steals everything already. You know what I mean? Catch will take anything.
Yeah.
That's why it's called Catch Can. It's basically freestyle in nature.
I love it so much.
So they allow it all in there to make a more exciting product.
Yeah.
And that's slam bang Western style wrestling. And that's where you also start to see things that are impossible. You know how hard it is to really give somebody a scoop body slam?
Oh, like the whole... Oh, man.
That's pretty hard. Or like to give someone like a pile driver, which wouldn't have been around here yet, or a power bomb, which are like, I promise you can't do that to me. And it's not because I can tougher than you. No. It's because it's impossible without cooperation.
Yeah,
like, it's like a child you could do it to, but not a person of substantial weight.
Especially enough they really don't want you to.
Yeah. The Boston Crab. Try putting someone in a Boston Crab.
How's the Boston Crab?
I'll show you.
Sure.
We'll put a
Chris
video.
Jericho?
Chris Jericho.
He did the Walls of Jericho, which was like...
He's not a wrestler.
I'm very new to the wrestling, especially all the pro wrestling.
He loves real fighting. I hate real fighting. I only like fake sports. I like roller derby.
Roller derby's fake?
And pro wrestling. I like fake things. Okay? I like pageantry.
And to be clear, this is our great producer in the back here, Jimmy. This is his face.
Both. I love professional wrestling and MMA. So this is amazing.
Jimmy's much more cultured than me.
Yeah, well, you can just tell by the accent.
You can tell.
Sorry.
So
bang wrestling.
So they got the slam bang wrestling. They're introducing finishes, which is so crazy. Controversial finishes.
This is when the signature move starts to come out?
The signature move, for Ed Lewis, it's the headlock. It's the stranglehold. It's just a bleeding headlock, but nobody's getting out of it. God, and it's true. At the time, nobody was getting out. Also, you got to think back. No one had ever seen these people come to town and you don't know what they're doing, but it seems to hurt your friend who got in there at the carnival. You know what I mean? You have no frame of reference. In professional wrestling, I remember I went to Al Snow's wrestling school, and one of Al Snow's big thing was headlock, punch, kick are the most important moves because everyone's had it done to them. You know what I mean? Sure, a dragon suplex looks cool, but have you ever been given a dragon suplex?
I have not.
No.
But I definitely have been grappling with someone much, much better than me and then had to tap for reasons I didn't even understand. All of a sudden, one of my limbs is just an agony and I have to... I didn't... So it definitely makes sense that, some of that's what Catch Cans is awesome for. It has this ankle lock. It has some really weird things that you just don't expect.
The toe hold.
Yeah.
You reach behind.
Yeah. I'm working on that right now. Ball and chain to a toe hold. I freaking love it. It's a great move.
And when you say toe hold to someone, it sounds so silly.
Sorry.
Scream in agony. He won the world championship with a toe hold. Well, they're not breaking your toe. They're holding your toe.
Yeah, it's your ankle.
Yeah,
and they will break your ankle.
And they will break your bleeding ankle. So they're coming up with these. They make the disqualification finish.
Ooh.
And they come up with creative ways to okay, well, sure, Toots is going to beat Stanislav, but we're going to make Stanislav still look strong. So we're going to make it see so if it's 3 falls, Toots gets one, and then Stanislav gets one, and the third one Toots wins, but it's a fluke, or maybe he did something underhanded, and the wrestlers can save face.
Then it's he won, but it's not a clean win. He's obviously, you want to see that fight again, right?
You want to see that fight again.
Yeah.
And you still have faith in Stanislav Sobiesko.
Right.
You still have faith in John Pesek. He's not just beaten to powder.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, because if it's a one side, who wants to see another one-sided beatdown?
And even then, it's like, okay, well, he's going to fight someone else, but he just got his ass beat.
Right.
I don't care.
Yeah.
If Mike Tyson lost 55 fights in a row, we
don't know his name.
Yeah, we don't see it.
Yeah.
So they're traveling the country, but they've got their home base in Nebraska. And they're pissing people off in other parts of the country. Because there's all these promoters, especially in big cities like New York City, where a guy named Jack Curley is doing a lot of work off and on. Because the whole Madison Square Garden could be an episode in itself, just in like the House of Cards politics of trying to run events in Madison Square Garden in the early 20th century.
Oh,
even now, well, the Moonies run half that city. That's insane. You know, the Moonies are a cult. And so this guy is a wrestling promoter in Madison Square Garden. He's had successes, he's had failures, and now he can't get the world title. And other people have their versions of world titles.
Okay.
You know, maybe like the Bauer world title in Boston or something.
Sure.
And they're starting to get a little angry. They're a little frustrated. They're not doing business. And all these super important world title matches are being held in Des Moines. You know what I mean? They're being held in Iowa. They're being held in Lincoln, Nebraska. And you got a Jack Curley in Madison Square Garden who's like, I can't get a card. I can't get a title match. I've got Madison Square Garden. I've got the most famous arena in the world. I got the biggest media market on earth. And
I can't fill it.
And I can't fill my building because the world champion just won't come here. And he won't fight the challengers we have. They won't take on any challengers that are from outside the camp. And at the same time, Ed Lewis is getting old. And he's going blind. Like he's straight up going, he's crashing his car. Like he's getting hurt, he's getting in fights, he's getting fat, and he's going blind. So it's about time to move the belt.
Yeah.
Okay? Even if just for a bit. Get him the champion. But they don't see themselves as having a good drawing card. Stanislav Sobiesko is old. John Pesek is small. And quite frankly, totally unpredictable. Too dangerous. You'll never get it back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And Toots Mondt has been beaten a lot.
So you got no obvious...
They don't see a big drawing star. And then there's this fella named Wayne Munn. And he's a Heartland boy. I think he's a Nebraska fella. Wayne Munn is a football star, collegiate football star.
Okay.
This is kind of pre-NFL.
Yeah.
Very early NFL.
Starting, yeah.
Collegiate football star, war veteran. He's 6'6". He's well into the 200-pound range. He's weird. He looks weird. But he looks like a star. He's retired from football. He tried boxing. He sucked. He was just like the worst fucking boxer. But he's so big.
Yeah.
People already know him around the country.
Looks good on a poster.
We're going to train him to wrestle. So they train him very fundamentally. Barely at all. He knows a few moves. He's got the football tackle. So that's like a great gimmick.
Of course.
Well, how could anyone get up from this big man's football tackle? Having beat a few people, gets in the ring with Lewis. They have a huge schmoz match. There's a wit that means like they pull out all of the stops in the theatrics.
Okay.
So Evan Lewis sells the first fall loss so much that they double the rest period between the falls because he's so out of it. And then the second fall is an over-the-top rope disqualification.
So is this...
this is a work.
Yeah, no. But in terms of falls, is that kind of how the match was...
Best of three.
So, and fall would be like a tap, like a full, like
tap
shoulder
or a
blades?
pinfall.
Oh, okay.
A tap or a pinfall.
Gotcha.
So the first fall goes to Munn, and he just devastates him. You know, he's half dead. Second fall, disqualification. That way Ed Lewis wins a fall to get a third fall. And it's disqualification by, Munn throws him over the top rope, which at the time was crazy. You know, now it's like 5 times a match, every single match. Someone gets thrown over.
Nuts. For someone who doesn't watch it, though, it's
dangerous.
Insane.
I've done it. It's not... You got to know what you're doing. And Billy Sandow, who is publicly the manager of Ed Lewis, gets in the ring. He freaks out. Looks like he's going to get in a fight with Munn. Munn's saying he didn't do anything. He just slipped out of his grasp over the rope. This big schmoz. Third round, Munn wins very decisively.
New champ.
Main Munn is the new champ. He's like 25. He looks great. He has no idea what he's doing. No idea. He's a bad wrestler.
And this is one of the first times, because you said so far, all the people that, even if it is some work, there's still really good wrestlers that are doing this work. Now, this is...
So far as I know, this is the first time that a non-wrestler
has the belt.
Gets to be the man. You know what I mean? Like, this is the first instance of, like, a real show wrestler.
Okay.
And people are not happy about it. People are not happy about it because they're real fucking wrestlers.
Right.
And now they're expected to go out there and lose to this kid that they know, like, couldn't hang with them if his life depended on it. Like, he would need a gun. You know? Like, he just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
He couldn't do it. And people are lambasting him in the press. And he's a decent draw in the Midwest, where he's from. And they're not really even shipping him out too much outside of that.
He hasn't gone to New York.
He's not going to New York or anything. And Jack Curley's a little angry. And Jack Curley's in the press being like, that was a work. These guys are fakers. And this guy couldn't stand around with any of my champions, with any of my wrestlers. And it's on and on and on. But the money's still coming in for the Goldust Trio. And they've got their trusted crew to put him over. What they don't really take into consideration is that one guy in their crew feels very indebted to Jack Curley. And that is Stanislav Sabisco. And Stanislav Sabisco's in his late 40s. He's bald. He's 5'8". All right, he's not.
He doesn't think
he's not a great attraction. He's been the world champion.
Yeah,
they even tried this. The Goldust Trio gave him the belt for a short period of time to try to see how liven some things up and give it back to Lewis, and he didn't draw because he's not a draw. He's fucking 48. He's 48 in 1925.
He's 2 years from the coffin.
He's in the crypt.
Right.
You know what I mean? So. He's just part of the crew, and he's a former world champion. You can put him in there with Munn, make Munn look good, give him credibility. He's a European man. His brother is a world champion wrestler. They come over from Europe. They're strongmen. They're very well educated. They're very smart guys. They've got big egos, and they're extremely talented.
And they know that maybe like this part of the run is over.
This guy knows, like, if money's coming, I should take it. And also, Jack Curley was kind of a sponsor to get Stanislaw and Waldick, his brother, into the country.
Originally.
He was a very instrumental part in getting them into the country, getting them work. So Jack Curley calls him up and just says, like, why don't you just take the belt? Bring it to me. It's a short-term deal, but I know you're capable of taking this title.
Is he suggesting that he get the title by just basically like going in and just fucking the person up and just taking it, or like go like, hey,
no, not politics?
Oh, no, okay.
He's saying you're supposed to go in and do the job. You're just supposed to go in and lose to this guy.
Oh yeah, but win.
Why don't you not?
Yeah.
And then you bring this title to New York. I'm going to give you a very handsome payday. I don't know what it was, but let's say you gave him $25,000 in 1925. Which is not unreasonable.
It's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money in 1925. That's retirement money.
Yeah,
you know
I mean? Fuck you money back then.
That's that Freedom 45 Trailer Park Boys shit, you know?
For sure.
You're done. You settle back. Get yourself a double wide. So he goes in. He goes into this match. He's got a policeman with him. He's got someone to watch his back. He knows everything he's got to do. he beats him so bad. Like, he's literally taking him down and pinning him over and over again to the point where the referee has to just stop pretending it's not happening.
Yeah.
Like, it's getting embarrassing.
Oh,
He's just crushing this kid. And you got to also think about, there is almost an entire foot's difference in height.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's a David versus Goliath situation, and he doesn't need the rock.
Yeah,
he's just tripping him and hurting him. He's just stretching the shit out of him. You know what I mean?
I do.
And Munn is left in the ring, embarrassed. Stanislav gets the hell out of there, books it, heads to New York. A couple months later, loses the belt back to Joe Stecker, the man that Ed Lewis beat for the title originally 6 years before. Loses the title back to Joe Stecker. Joe Stecker's with Curly. They're doing great business in New York.
Yeah.
Stanislav Zbyszko more or less retires pretty soon after this because he got a huge payday, and
he did his thing.
He's kind of got like one town he can work in. You know what I mean? Like,
he burned some bridges.
Can't really be. It's kind of like in the mafia. If someone if you got you got a rival mob.
Yeah.
And you got an inside guy, and he turns and screws everybody over. What do you do with that guy? Do you reward him, or do you kill him because you can't trust him? You kill him because you can't trust him.
That's it, right?
It's to the horse. It's to the glue factory.
Yeah.
With Stanislav Zbyszko.
He's happy about it though, right? Like,
and he's happy. He's old. He's got his money. And his brother, they buy a farm. They end up training a great, very important wrestler named Larry Zbyszko, who works in the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Oh, cool. So stay in the field. Who
has like one of the greatest drawing houses in the history of New York himself.
Oh, Jesus.
And I guess he was just like a kid who lived next door. But so they accomplished this goal. And at the same time, there's a lot of cracks showing in the Gold Dust Trio already. Billy Sando's brothers are trying to kind of weasel in. They're trying to get Toots out because they understand that Toots is kind of the part that can be left behind. They can't leave their brother. They can't leave the star.
Yeah.
They don't really understand that Toots is the most important part in a lot of ways historically. So by 27, this is 25. This is like April, I think 26th or 25. By 27, they're not working together. Toots is working with Jack Curley.
Oh, he went up to New York, okay.
Ed is doing business with Joe Stecker for more matches to get bigger gates. And Billy is training new wrestlers. He has more success. He has like world champions. Everett Marshall was managed by Billy Sando, who was a great world champion. But they're all kind of past their prime. Like, the most important things they've ever done were together.
Okay.
And Billy's really kind of... his heyday is come and gone. Ed is going to have a very strange life because he's wrestling blind. You know what I mean? Like, he can barely see. And he still has some great, like, draws. I'm not going to say they're great matches.
Sure.
But he draws great crowds for a few more years. But never the way he did with Billy managing and Toots giving the ideas.
Right.
And he ends up soon after this retiring. And like most wrestlers, coming out of retirement and then going, money's money, and he lives a very lavish lifestyle. And that's like some of these guys are so hard, and then you see pictures of them, and then like again, like gangsters, like they got the rings,
the leather,
they got the perfectly tailored suit, the manicure. It's like, dude, you grew up on a farm in Iowa, but you get some money and you like it. The man I know in my life personally the most, who has had the most manicures, is like an oil and gas guy from Newfoundland. But he loves a manicure. And he wears an ass guard. So,
wow, I mean, that's ballsy.
Confidence. So he ends up joining the National Wrestling Alliance when it forms in '47. And being kind of a face spokesman, traveling figurehead for the National Wrestling Alliance, which is an alliance of promoters that kind of control the world title. And they've got this main champion, a guy named Lou Thesz. Lou Thesz is kind of the last of the shooter world champions, if you don't include Brock and Kurt, who never had to shoot. Very capable. The great wrestlers would say not that capable. But as far as a wrestler in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, very capable. And Ed would just kind of be his handler. Ed would come around the country with him as his manager to add prestige and legitimacy to him. But he was blind as a bat. And he was getting a step in, right? Like he was... They shot him some money because he never saved a dime. And that's what happened to Ed. Billy eventually just retires. And he's a promoter, so he had lots of money. Because I don't know if you understand how wrestling money gets distributed, but I believe the great Jim Cornette quote is, you put all of the money from the gate in a bushel basket and throw it in the air, and whatever sticks to the ceiling you give to the boys. That is...
All the promoters are making up everything, right?
Yeah, that's how wrestling works. There's no union in wrestling. It's not like... much like the UFC, there's no union, and the money distribution is not the same as it is in, say, the NFL or the MLB or the NBA or the NHL, where there's a union and things like that. So, a lot of these guys weren't making any money. Now, if you want to talk about someone who made a lot of money and pissed it all away, you have to go to the third and I think the most important part of the Gold Dust Trio, which is Toots Mondt.
Yeah.
And Toots Mondt works and works and works, and he's got his fingers in everything. He stays in New York, and then he goes to LA, and then he comes back to New York, and he works with a guy named Jess McMahon, who takes over after Jack Curley. Jess McMahon...
It's a huge name.
His son, Vince McMahon Sr.
Right.
Leaves the NWA, starts Capital Wrestling out of Washington, D.C., which has its range from Washington to Maine. So it's got New York, it's got Philadelphia, Jersey.
So, question though. So after, is part of what you're saying that the Gold Rush Trio come and they start making this more exciting. Now all other promoters, they basically see what they're doing and going, okay, they're getting way more ticket sales. Like we need to do the same thing. And did that then just disseminate into the rest of the kind of sport where people started being more theatric?
Yeah,
and more...
it kind of began to travel and see that a lot of the early promoters were guys that had wrestled.
Yeah.
So a lot of people would join the troops. Guys like the Welch family and the Welches and the Fullers, who are the same family, and they run out of Tennessee and Memphis, who kind of introduced professional wrestling to the South in the 30s, and they promoted into the 90s.
Jesus.
There's so many of them. They're worse than the Hearts. There's so many of them. And Stu Hart worked with Toots Mondt in New York,
okay.
And then came back and opened this up. And so that's kind of how everything comes out of this, and one guy ends up here, and one guy ends up here. And then they go to Japan. And they've been working in England. They've been working matches in England already. But they start to steal a little bit more of this, though it's different there. They have round systems, and then it's in Germany. Then it's in France. Then it's in South Africa. Then it's in Australia. Australia is the biggest, most profitable wrestling company in the world for a long time. It's an Australian company.
Which is crazy.
So you've got this huge span that comes from Toots, including the WWE, because he works with Vince McMahon's grandfather, and then he helps Vince's father start what becomes the WWF in the 60s, which then is sold to Vince under the guise of the WWF in the 80s. Sold. Don't let that Trump bullshit story about how he earned that thing. It's not true. He had to pay for it with the revenue from the company. That's not money. That's free money.
Wait. You got to explain this now. What?
Okay, well, all right, real quick.
Yeah.
So Vince bought the WWF from his father and the other investors in the WWF. Right? And the deal was that he had a year to pay them.
Oh, wait, so I'm saying I'm going to buy this from you, but let me run it for a year, and the profits that I make in that year is what I used to pay you?
And the deal was all right, if you don't pay us back, pay us what you owe us in the year, we get the company back, and you don't get your money back. Which sounds like a really harsh thing when he says it.
Yeah.
But it was already his company. He just had to take the revenue he was making from Madison Square Garden selling out every week or every 3 weeks to pay. I could do that. Anybody could do that. I don't like them. That's all. So, yeah, that's the story of the Gold Dust Trio. What a climactic end I'm just giving us. But
no, I mean, and you're saying like that happened over what, like a 3 to 5 year period?
Yeah, I would say the Gold Dust Trio really 21 to 27, but really 21 to 25 is
when they were the guys.
The game completely changes, and these guys own it.
Right.
These guys are just as important to wrestling as Vince McMahon is later in the century to changing, or to Dana White and those brothers whose names I can't remember. Yes. Like, just as important are the Gracies to MMA. Just as important to basically reinventing a wheel. You know what I mean? And making it lucrative. Making it really... Because it wasn't... You could be like one of 5 people who made a lot of money. You know what I mean? And these guys would go crazy. When we talk about Frank Gosh, I'll tell you about him going to the Yukon to fleece gold miners to make some money. Jesus, you know what I mean? Imagine having to go to the Yukon so you can get paid. You don't win medals and get paid for it, right? You just get the medal. You know, Olympic wrestlers are broke.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so betting and gambling, so work was already there, but like the money wasn't there. A lot of these guys still were working in coal mines.
Right.
They were still farming.
Yeah. You'd maybe just go for like a certain period of time, whatever.
And then these guys come around and find a way not only to make the draw bigger, to make the appeal wider, to make the most out of your actions. They figure out a way to be a professional fighter who fights 7 days a week, twice on Sunday, because they're not getting hurt because they're cooperating.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. That's huge.
And that is huge. And mostly it's huge for the promoter.
Because it can put on that many shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the promoter gets all the money that lands back in the basket.
Yeah, yeah. Not that much sticks to the ceiling.
Not a lot sticks to the ceiling. Even stucco. Not a lot sticks to the ceiling. So, thank you for joining us here at Catch 22.
Yeah.
We'll have a lot more of these. Hopefully I'll get a little more polished. But maybe not. You never know. And I believe next week we're going to go in to what I think is the most important training ground.
Oh, yes.
For both catch wrestlers and dynamic professional wrestlers. And that's Riley's Gym in the Snake Pit in Wigan, England. All right. Thanks a lot, gang.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have fun.